Thank you so much for taking the time this evening to come, especially on a Friday, to come and be a part of this event. I really appreciate it. And, tonight, I'm excited. I get to share a dream that I've been thinking about for quite some time. And actually, it's the first time I've been able to make it public. So I'm really excited to share as this vision has continued to grow and this whole idea of reimagining education. And so I'm excited tonight. I really appreciate you guys coming to be a part of this. But tonight is really a celebration in creativity and innovation. But it's not simply any innovation, as we know that man has the ability to create evil and innovate things for destruction and harmful. But tonight we're here to celebrate an innovation, a type of innovation tonight that brings forth blessing and human flourishing. And that's why this conference is about theology, culture, and entrepreneurship. Because it's theology that brings a moral dimension to our innovation, whereby we can create things that are true and good and beautiful. And just like you heard tonight from our first two speakers, you can bring forth things that are true and good and beautiful. And when it's an idea, when you take an idea and a product and a business and a ministry and a for-profit, and you build it through that lens of truth, goodness, and beauty, and then when it goes public, it brings forth blessing. And everybody is better as a result of bringing it forward. So the title of my talk is Higher Education for a Changing Age. And what does this have to do with theology, culture, and entrepreneurship? One of the things about entrepreneurs is entrepreneurs don't necessarily see problems. Entrepreneurs see opportunities. And they can see a problem, and through that problem they see an opportunity to, hey, we can make this better. We can actually improve it. And as I look at the educational landscape today, in my opinion, there's no greater industry in trouble today than education. In particular, I'm talking about higher education tonight. So my title again is Higher Education for a Changing Age. We're here to reimagine education. That's the beauty, isn't it? Being made in God's image is you can imagine something. And through that imagination, you can bring something to life, bring something forward. And so tonight is a celebration of creativity and innovation. But first thing I want to mention is a little bit really quick on my story. Is I brought a few pictures that illustrate my entire academic career, beginning in grade school, going through high school and college. So I want to just share a few of those. Here I am in grade school. Here I am in high school. And I guess I grew up a little bit in college, as I'm not putting my head on the desk, I guess. I guess I grew up and matured a little bit. Because we know that's not pictures of me, of course, but it does represent the theme of my educational career. And if you visited the classroom, if I was there and present at the time, this is what you would probably see. And of course, I'm not exaggerating this, as my two parents are here this evening, and they can testify that this was probably true. But I think it was this experience, strange enough, I think it was this experience that actually made me most qualified for what I'm doing now. Because I think my story represents most or a lot of students today who are bored, they're uninspired, and consequently they're underachieving. And so the story, I'm going to advance the story because the real story begins on January of 2011. And we had 25 brave young men and women, along with some brave faculty and mentors who participated in an educational experiment. And we have one here this evening, Annie, wave. She's in there somewhere. And as we're celebrating innovation tonight, these 25 brave souls took a chance on a new method and model of education. And it was a diverse group of people coming from different parts of the country, different states, different familial backgrounds, experiences in life. And you had a chunk in this group that always excelled academically in their education. 4.0, always excelled. In fact, I could take some of these, Annie, I would say Eve is one of these, that I could drop a group of them into an Ivy League setting and they would probably excel. They just always did well. In fact, I had one particular young lady who turned down a full ride scholarship to a prestigious university to participate in this experiment. There was others in this group that had a similar story as mine, as they too struggled throughout their educational career. One young lady in particular, I won't point her out, but she was told by her guidance counselor at a very young age that she would never attend college, that she didn't have the ability. And you'll excuse me if I get emotional on the way, as this group is very near and dear to me, because I love them deeply. But she was told she would never attend college. And I remember my initial conversation with her, as her eyes were watering as she was telling me her story, because she carried the words with her her entire academic career. But she was in tears as she was telling me her story, and you could notice right away that she severely lacked confidence. But I convinced her to come and participate in this new experiment. And it was a beautiful thing to watch her grow in confidence. And she, to tell you the truth, ended up having the last laugh. As she finished this program, she went on to finish her degree at another institution, and she finished on the dean's list. And to take it even one step further, she's about to complete her master's degree. And she was told she'd never go to college. So we had another young man that actually failed community college, dropped out, came through this experiment, and ignited his life. And I can say he's probably arguably the best student that ever came through the program. And one more I just want to mention of a young man who lived with Asperger's to the degree where he had people come to help him get dressed at the beginning each and every morning. And one of my greatest joys was in memories was watching this community embrace this young man and treat him like everyone else, going back to, I think, Jeremy, what you were talking about, the ordinary. And treat him like everyone else. And it was genuine. He was one of the group. By the end of the program, you would have a difficult time knowing he had Asperger's. And as we got on the bus to travel to Italy, as that's one of the parts of the program that we do, we travel together to Italy. His parents watched him get on the bus in tears because they never thought he would be able to do something like this. He recently graduated from the University of Minnesota, I believe, and he's found employment. And I think he's living on his own, if I remember correctly. So, needless to say, it greatly impacted our lives. Faculty, students. And since then, in fact, this whole group, those that went on to finish their college degree, the average GPA was, I think, between a 3.8 and 3.9. And so, since then, we've had 9 other groups participate in this experiment, a new method and model of education, and we're finding that each can tell you a similar story. And there's some here that you might want to talk to through the night. But what was it about? I just want to preface on what this method and model just a little bit was about, because it's a prerequisite of what's coming and what I want to share tonight. But we took a Hebrew We borrowed from the Hebrews, a Hebrew style of education. One being when you looked at Christ's model, what do we find? Which wasn't uncommon at that time. He was one teacher, rabbi, with 12 students, but they all stayed together as one unit. They never changed classes, classmates, or professors. But this gave him the time to pour himself into the lives of his students. So what we did, we tried with this experiment. We said, what if we took groups of maybe 25? And we put them in groups, or we had joined by 2 faculty and mentors. And what if they all stayed together through this 18-month experiment, where they never changed classes, classmates, or professors? Another unique thing is, what was unique is we decided we're going to, like the Hebrews understood, to develop a wisdom-based curriculum. Not a knowledge-based, but a wisdom-based, whereby knowledge was not the end, but only the means to something greater, which was godly wisdom. Closely related to that is we introduced, because the Hebrews understood what we call the unity of knowledge, not a fragmented understanding. My experience of going through school was I was taking random classes, jumping from class to class, and there was nobody there to help build any conceptual bridges, and it just felt hodgepodge. But we said, what if we tried an experiment where we unified knowledge, where we just studied one subject at a time, but we did it in a sequence, in a flow that followed the biblical narrative. So for example, where the liberal arts have failed today is we failed to tie them into a bigger story. At one time, our story was there, and students understood the big picture and how each subject fit into this bigger whole, this bigger narrative. But what happened in today's education, what happened when we took away the story, these subjects just fragmented and become meaningless today. So we found this was a tragedy. We said, what if we brought that story back? What if we brought the narrative back, the central story? And by bringing the story back, what happened is what became meaningless became meaningful in the lives of the students. Because we say without the creation of the universe, physics doesn't exist, mathematics doesn't exist. Without the creation of life, biology. Without the creation of man, anthropology. Without family, sociology. These subjects were never meant to be understood independent of this story. And we've neutered these subjects from meaning. We said, what if we brought the story back and made it central? And we unified all subjects around the story, which is what we did. We took students through a journey with chapter 1, a 16 to 18-month journey, where we start with critical thinking to give them the tools to learn on how to study and learn for themselves. Then they take this and they apply it to every subject thereafter. And we start with theology and philosophy, which is the foundation. And then what if we added that, the next chapter, which was the creation of the universe and life, the next phase. And it's there, we took students through mathematics, the language of the universe, physics, the universe, biology, life. Then if we added the next great events, the creation of man and the family. And what if we took them where anthropology, man. Then the fine arts, is man being made in the image of God, is a co-creator. We need to understand the fine arts after we understand man first. And the exciting part is this: when we took our students in this experiment on the journey to Italy for 5 weeks. What a way to study the fine arts. In fact, we were, where we stayed in Florence, we stayed in an old 14th century monastery up on the hills of Tuscany overlooking the city. You just can't beat that. But then, of course, sociology and focusing on the family. And then lastly, the creation of a nation, how God took a people group and molded them into a nation. And it's there we walk them through the principles of government law and economics. But what if we did it, we said, one at a time, which each subject built off the preceding one, where the students walk away with a unity of knowledge rather than a fragmented understanding that we have today. And I'll go back to the wisdom. This is where it's equally tied to wisdom, because that was the strength of the program, why the students did so well. Because it was wisdom we were after, and that was the motivator, the godly wisdom. So for example, in chapter 1, this whole idea that this wisdom-based curriculum the point was to see God correctly. Then it was the second one to see creation correctly. Third was to seeing myself correctly. And then the others was seeing to others and cultures correctly. Because the whole point, this is the wisdom base, because if we focused on wisdom, in other words, if I see it correctly, then I know how to better treat it. I know how to better steward it. If I see creation correctly, I know how to better treat creation. I know how to better steward creation. If I see myself correctly, I can then better treat myself correctly and steward myself correctly. And that was the motivator. You see, because it was wisdom we were after, and all of a sudden these subjects had everything to do with the way we live. Quickly on the others, just some other things we introduced in this experiment. Critical thinking that I already mentioned, that was central in everything we did. It was a way where we made students think their way through every subject. We didn't spoon feed them. We made them think their way through a subject. We also experimented with classical, which is not uncommon today, but we didn't use textbooks. We used primary sources. We used great books. We used some of the greatest minds who ever lived, introduced them. We had a mentoring approach that goes with that community. As the students and faculty, we lived together. We shared life together, and the faculty were there to mentor them in the fundamentals of living and learning. We also, in this experiment, of course, the biblical worldview in every phase of the program. Global, going to Italy. We didn't have lectures, we had discussions. Discussions replaced lectures. You know who their lectures were? From some of the greatest minds who ever lived. The authors. That was their lecture. Then we come to class, we can just talk. We can have discussion together. And then lastly, it was the Hebrews understand holistic. They understood, and this is where we approached the students, we didn't see them as a brain. We saw them as a person. They were a spiritual being, a moral being, a social being, an emotional being, a physical being, and an intellectual being. They weren't just a brain, and we didn't treat them as just a brain. So this story of these 25, this experiment that we went through, that serves as the backdrop of what I want to share. This idea of reimagining education. CreatEd. We call ourselves a community of theology and liberal arts loving entrepreneurs. And we're calling into question a system that's dominated the American educational landscape for the last 100 years. And we're reimagining education. Why are we doing this? For 4 primary reasons. First, historically. Historically speaking, I want to present that what we're experiencing today is fast becoming a tired system. Because it was built for another age. It was built for the industrial age. We began as an agricultural civilization. Higher ed at that time focused on theology and the liberal arts with maybe some medicine and law sprinkled in. But the goal was to produce wise and virtuous people. And when the industrial age hit, you had some very influential people that changed the direction of higher education, where they moved away from creating a wise and virtuous person to how do we create skilled labor for the industrial age. And that's why today, when you ask someone why they go to college, they say, so I can get a job. That's where it came from. From that shift to the industrial age where everything became about job preparation or skilled labor. In addition, they built a system to reflect an industrial metaphor. This is why we group people today according to ages. And we march them through an assembly line education with standardized curriculums and standardized testing with this assumption that everybody's the same, that everybody learns the same, everybody learns at the same speed, and has the same capacities. But we have this belief, and we kind of create this industrial paradigm and march them through this assembly line type of education today. Some are built to succeed in this system. And the rest of people that I've experienced is my own self, and in the lives of the other students, some are left to feel stupid. And what's wrong with me? Parents wondering what's wrong with my son or daughter. It was built for a different age. But the people who brought about this change never considered what would happen if we ever left the industrial age. Yet we have an entire system built for the industrial age, which is what's happened. We have left the industrial age and we've left the information age. And yet it's still trying to prepare students for an industrial economy that's not there anymore. And this leads me to my next point, is not only historical, but it also relevancy. Because of the information age, the current system is being disrupted today. And is becoming increasingly, when I say irrelevant, today. Education's not becoming irrelevant, but the form that they're putting forth today is becoming more and more irrelevant today. Why is that? Because with the information age, we have access to information at our fingertips today. And when I ask students, if you ask students today, where do you go if you want to learn something? They're going to say the internet. Or they're going to say something like YouTube. In other words, if a young man or woman wants to learn to build something today, they can go watch a video. And then they can go build it. They didn't have to pay $15,000 a semester to learn how to do that. It's right there at their fingertips. And so when I was growing up, I didn't have the information age. I had to physically go somewhere to learn something, whether that was to the library or I had to go to a school and stand physically in front of somebody, or somebody had to stand physically in front of me and to get this information. But that's no longer the case. It's at your fingertips. Here's some examples. It's disrupting everything. Some of you guys may have heard of these. Have you guys heard of Khan Academy? Who's heard of Khan Academy? It's great instruction for free. You've got the great courses. Anybody heard of the great courses? In other words, you can pay $200, $100 or less, and you can get access to award-winning professors in almost anything you want to learn today. And they were award-winning for fractions of the cost. Great content. And on lynda.com, and almost if you want to learn about any kind of industry or business, anything that goes, you can get it. It's right there at your fingertips for fractions of the cost. And so what's happening is being disrupted as more and more people are beginning to ask the question, do I need to spend all this money to get this information when it's so readily available today at fractions of the cost? Closely related to this, talking about cost, is the next point. Quality versus cost. The current system is experiencing, in my opinion, an unsustainable combination. And it's the combination of quality going down, but cost keeps going up. That's just unsustainable. And parents and students and employers are rightfully beginning to ask, is it really worth the investment today? As quality keeps going down, but price keeps going up. And what I'm saying, people aren't saying, I don't want to be educated. They want to be educated. But they're asking right questions right now. So, do I need to spend $50,000 to $100,000, walk away with a $50,000 to $100,000 debt Is it worth the investment now? And lastly, one that's most important to me and should be for all of us, is the system itself is becoming increasingly hostile toward Christian institutions and Christian values. And if you haven't heard of the recent bill passed in the state of California, I encourage everyone to Google SB 1146. Has anybody heard of the SB 1146 yet? It's starting to leak out now. I have some excerpts from a bill that's being passed in California that's jeopardizing Christian education. I'll just read a few of them. It says, talking about the bill, discriminates against religious colleges, said John Jackson, the president of William Jessup University. If we don't play ball with the state, the state will attempt to drive us out of existence. This is from an article that I read about the bill. Schools would no longer be allowed to integrate, if this is passed, schools would no longer be allowed to integrate faith throughout their teaching curriculum. If it's passed, this legislation will also give students a right to sue. This is at a Christian institution now. It will give the student a right to sue, for example, if they were offended by prayer in class. And so if passed without amendments, the new law would also very likely disqualify students attending California Christian colleges and universities from eligibility for Cal Grants, a key state-level student aid program. We brought it up with some institutions here, asking if they've heard about it, and some of the colleges said yes, that we have heard about it, and actually they said they're talking about it in Minnesota. We asked what's going to happen if this passes nationwide and goes through the states. They said, well, probably about 80% will go out of business. And if they don't go out of business, they're going to have to conform. And they're going to have to compromise their values to get the aid. My point in saying all this is it's not if, but it's a matter of when now. And it's time for this is why I'm talking about it's time to bring forth innovation now. As we have to bring forth a solution to this problem for Christian education. And that goes back to what the night is about entrepreneurship, that we see a problem. But entrepreneurs see solutions, we see opportunities, and we have an opportunity now to start thinking about a new system for Christian higher education, because the hostility is only going to increase over time. And I want to share one more thing about why I also think it's time that's closely related to this. It's because the prevailing zeitgeist, or defining mood of the spirit of the institution today, is a very progressive liberal agenda that is passing on values that are destructive, and they're values that are actually destroy a civilization. They're not values that build, they're values that will actually begin to destroy a civilization. And I'll simplify it in this way. The kind of things that are happening and being passed along in our system. When a civilization exchanges truth for falsehood, goodness for evil, beauty for ugly, your civilization cannot flourish. It's destined to devolve. Or if a civilization gets to a point where it can no longer differentiate between truth and falsehood, goodness and evil, beauty and ugly. When you can no longer differentiate, you're destined to devolve. And that's the point we are reaching today in our civilization, and why it's time to set forth a new system, or to begin to reimagine, to think about this, because we have reached a point when we can no longer distinguish between a male and a female. You see, when you can no longer differentiate between truth and falsehood, something so simple, so straightforward, is the difference between a man and a woman. It's as though we've educated ourselves so much, we've educated ourselves to the point where we can no longer differentiate. We're educating ourselves into absurdity. And so my point is, my passion in all of this is just, it's time. It's time to start rethinking, because these things are destructive. They're tearing down a civilization, and the passion in me says, why do I want to perpetuate this? Why do I want to keep giving that authority and power over to ideas that are destructive? That maybe the passion comes to begin to reimagine a new system. Just last month, the National Review was preaching to the choir, in a sense. It says the educational system, however, can't be reformed from within. It's stacked top to bottom with progressive activists, even in red states. We must fix our education system or slowly but surely lose our culture. So that means creating a new model. And that's what I want to bring forward. I want to bring forward something that I've been conceptualizing for quite some time. And it's practical in a sense, but restate, we are a community of theology and liberal arts loving entrepreneurs here to reimagine higher education. So what I want to bring forth and propose is I briefly described that new method and model when I shared about that group of 25 that went through this experiment. But I want to share now is it's time to surround this with a better system. And it gives people a choice and gives it free from the control of government, whereby we're free to pass along our values. So I'm going to do the best I can to explain. It's a very simple concept, and I was thinking it's more easily understood in relation to the current system. This is the beauty of it. You get to reimagine. That's the beauty of the gift of being made in God's image. You get to imagine. So here's something that we can begin to imagine that we're actually bringing forth as a company. But it's actually best understood in relation to the current system. In the current system, our experience was something like this. You high school, then you went to the university. And when you got to the university, you had different, you had the College of Arts or College of Science and Technology. And what you would do is you would select, okay, what is my interest? So maybe it's business and economics, and you choose that. And you can click on that, and then what would come up is a list of things that you can major in, right? You can major in all this, and so you go through this 4 to 5 year process of supposedly learning some skill, and after this 4 to 5 year process, then you begin to, okay, I've got this skill, so I'm going to go to these companies and see if they would hire me for my skills. And again, you could do something like if you're interested in the arts, you could pull something up and you have all these different majors within the arts. You go through a 4 to 5 year process of learning something, and then you would go to the marketplace and try to sell your skills, and hopefully somebody will hire you. What I want to argue, or what I want to suggest, is that this is the least effective way to learn a craft or a skill. What I want to bring forward is that the university system should have never gotten into the vocational business, the skills business. As I suggest, it's the least effective way to learn a craft. And not only is that the least effective way to learn a craft, it's the most expensive way to learn a craft. Is you have to go through this 4 to 5 year system, sitting in a classroom that's highly theoretical. It's the least effective way. I'm not saying it's ineffective, but it's the least effective way to actually learn a craft. Where I contend that there's a better and more cost-effective way to do this. To learn a craft, it can be done by going outside of this system that we bought. They've done a fabulous job of convincing us all, haven't they? A fabulous job to convince us all that, and they've tied almost every single industry to this, that almost every industry has to funnel through this system. They've done a tremendous job of that. And I'm not saying I'm not saying it's wrong, I'm not saying it's evil or anything like that, but what I'm saying is I'm just arguing, suggesting it's the least effective way to actually learn a craft or a skill, and the most cost-effective, or the most expensive. So what I want to propose is something Where here we have that 16-month, that thing that this style of education that I mentioned at the beginning. But it's during this time of these 16 months that we took that experiment, and it was during that time of experiment that we placed the emphasis on once again creating a wise and virtuous person. But we also focus on character. We focus on integrity once again. And the system is built, when you do research on the most sought after skills for employment, the system that we have in place is already built to develop that. So we would focus on those skills of social and people skills, critical thinking skills, communication skills, and problem-solving skills. And then here's the idea. From that, when you have that foundation, from this, is the student can go straight to the industry itself. And so we're bringing back what we call apprenticeship style of education, where they have these skills within them already, the character and virtue within them, and then they can go straight to the industry themselves in the areas of the companies that are interested in. But the companies have bought into the movement. And they've bought into the movement and have committed to themselves to apprenticing. To apprenticing these students, where students are apprenticed by professionals in the industry. They're not taught by educators, they're actually taught by professionals in the industry that they're interested in. That is the best way to learn a craft in a skill, is being mentored by professionals in the industry itself. And this single decision of companies joining a movement to commit themselves to apprenticing students single-handedly changes the game. Because what you've done is you've already, just by that act alone, it brings value to the system now, because what the students gain is valuable experience and they gain a resume. So it can be constructed, I'm not going to go into a lot of details, but you can construct it in such a way that it's a mutually beneficial relationship between the student and the company. Well, instead of spending $10,000 to $30,000 a semester, the student can volunteer their services to a company at little to no cost. Because the cost of education today, students demand high entry-level wages. And the company has to pay high entry-level wages and they have to pay benefits. Where here students can volunteer their labor to the company at little to no cost to the company. Because it's understood by the student that it's part of their education. And that it's better, and I can do it cheaper this way than if I went through the system itself. I can go directly to the industry and be taught by a professional, and they can pass on their skills and knowledge to me. And it's not far-fetched to think that students would actually, I'm not saying this is what happened, but it's not far-fetched to think that students would pay a little bit to be apprenticed. Because people back in the day, that's how they used to be apprenticed. Apprentice would go stay with the master and pay the master because I just want to learn the skill. And that's how people used to learn. It's not far-fetched that you can imagine students going to a company and say, look, I'll pay you. I just want to learn. I just want to learn from me. I'm willing to pay you to teach me. And I can still argue that it's cheaper than what you would get today if you actually paid somebody a little bit to learn the craft. So, but regardless of that, what the student gets in return is potential employment. They get a dossier that's complete with a resume, portfolio, letters of recommendations from supervisors, and it's coming to the point where experience is fast beginning to trump the degree. People are looking more and more for experience and less about the degree. So, I'm just going to quick picture and bring it to a close. But going back to that, you know how you went to the university system and you have these different College of Art, Science, and you choose one of them. What I'm talking about here is we can create a website where if you're interested in business and economics, once again, that when you click on this, what comes up are not majors, but what comes up is a list of businesses. List of businesses and industries who are committed to apprenticing you. You see, you're going straight to the industry itself, and these companies have committed to apprenticing you. So majors don't come up, business. Another example is if you're interested in the arts. You can click on the arts, but what comes up are businesses, industries who are willing and committed to the movement and said they're willing to apprentice you. So you can go straight to the industry itself and learn the craft that way. I'm going to mention one final thing, but the point is the current system, the whole point is it's time for the church to begin to reimagine as it's becoming more hostile to Christian education. We can't kick the can down the road and pretend it's not going to happen. I liken it to the levee system, that what happened in Louisiana. That every administration knew there was a problem. But what they were gambling on is that it's not going to happen on my watch. And so they kicked it down the road. And eventually it happened. And it's the same situation. We know it's coming, but we can't just, every administration can't continue to kick the can down the road and pretend it's not going to happen. It's only a matter of time. And the church, it's time for the church. See, the church in the past, we used to be really creative. You know, but we fall into a trap of that we like to condemn. We like to critique and we like to copy. But we no longer like to create. And so what CreatEd is doing, we're reimagining and we're creating a movement of companies to join in this movement where we can go outside of the system and actually provide something that's better, cheaper, faster, and more relevant, and will teach you and apprentice you and give you the skills. As I said, I've argued that it's the current system is the least effective way to do so. So lastly, I just want to mention one other thing. There's also a group of students. Oops. There's also a group of students that they have a desire in their life to start their own and to bring forth an idea that they have and bring it to life. Several students have their own ideas for a business, a ministry, a nonprofit, such as Jeremy, such as Jordan, that we heard tonight. They had a vision, and they brought it forth. And we created a way, where do these people go? So what CreatEd has done is we've created an 8-month, you go 16 months and add another 8 months, and you be taught in the skills of entrepreneurship. And you're actually, once again, apprenticed. You're apprenticed by skilled and professional entrepreneurs who have started companies in the past. They will come alongside you and help birth your idea or dream if you have one. That I was watching a film one time that helps bring understanding to this. And the film said every life, at the end of their life has, watching video, it said every life, at the end of their life has 2 films. One film is the life of a person that you actually lived, the life you actually lived. The other film is the life you wish you would have lived and never did. And they said, how do we narrow the distance between those 2 films? As so many young people today have gifts and passions and callings and ideas, but what we often hear, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I'd like to do it, but I don't know what to do. And this 8-month entrepreneurship is to walk you through the steps on how to take an idea from conception to reality and bring it to life. And so that's what we have in developing right now. We already have the 16-month. This is me in development now. And at the same time, we're going to be talking and working with companies to buy into this movement where we can go outside the system and reimagine a better education today. One that's better for the student and better prepares. Is this for everybody? No, it's not. Is it for every industry? No, it's not. As there's some industries that are so closely tied to the system that there's just no other choice right now, but it has to work within the system. So it's not for everything and everybody, but I want to end with revisiting this original group, as they were the ones who braved the new experiment and launched us all in a new direction. And who knows, 30, 40, 50 years from now, that we can look back on this group as ones who sparked a reformation in education. That it's time, and I think the nation's ready. And we're planting a seed which can grow over time as more and more companies begin to buy into this movement, who are willing and ready and willing to invest in the next generation. Maybe not financially, but they'll invest by opening their doors and apprenticing the next generation, pass on their craft, pass on their skills to the next generation. And we can save Christian education, and we can save and continue to pass on the values that we hold dear. So I appreciate you guys. Thank you very much. And thank you. And I know Jack's going to come up for a reception, or talk about the reception. But you've been a wonderful, and I hope it's been an enjoyable evening for you. Thank you very much.